Welcome to Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills, where we present clear thinking on confusing topics in challenging times. We are doing something very different today, presenting something in a little bit of a different vein, but not too different. And I will be introducing someone who I have known nearly all of my life, who is a big part of my family history and my professional background. Some of you may know that I've been working in the field of mental health, teaching a spiritual psychology called Three Principles Psychology for almost 30 years. And I have someone with me who I really grew up with, who was very close with the founder of this psychology, Mr. Sydney Banks, and who has been a part of my life for as long as I can almost remember. And that's Dr. George Pranksy. Welcome, George.
Nice to be here, Amy.
Dr. Pranksy is a founding professional of the Three Principles of Mind, Thought, and Consciousness. For almost 50 years, he has shared this understanding with individuals, couples, businesses, and colleagues, helping them realize new possibilities in their lives and work. He is the author of several books, including The Relationship Handbook, The Secret to Mental Health, which I believe is the most recent book. Is that right?
That's right.
And Unbreak Your Heart, which sounds like a country song.
Yeah.
And has created over 60 audio recordings for people to listen for their own mental health. Throughout his career, Dr. Pranksy has developed and mentored many of the leaders in this field and continues to offer guidance to help people understand the human factor in their lives. His unique perspective on human interaction has earned him national recognition as a speaker and thought leader. He is co-founder, along with his wife Linda, of Pranksy and Associates and a member of the executive committee of the Three Principles Global Community. So welcome. I'm so glad you decided to do this, George.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Amy.
Yeah, it's great. So for those of you in the listening audience, George's speech will be a little bit peppered with pauses and little lapses where he's trying to remember words because he had a stroke about, I think, 2 years ago. Is that right, George?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. And he's actually recovered remarkably well from a pretty major stroke. And is still teaching and working and sharing the principles. So what I want to start with, George, is people know me on this radio show as the host. Some people in my community know me as an activist and as someone who also teaches resiliency and many things. So they might be interested in this show because of who I am and knowing that this is my background. But why do you think people should listen to this show? What do you think is the most important thing? I kind of want to get that out at the front so people, perk up and open their ears and really listen.
So what you're asking is, why would a person want to listen to this show?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how to answer that. I guess they might be entertained by it. So
hey man, we all need entertainment these days.
Yeah. So that's one reason.
Yeah.
And also, they might find it informative.
Mm. Informative, and would you say helpful as well?
Yeah.
Okay. I certainly think so, as someone who's embraced this psychology to teach and to share. And I wanted to go back to establish our foundation together. I was actually reading your book, and you talk about first meeting Sydney Banks, the founder of the Three Principles Psychology, the one who came up with those three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. And you talk about, actually, I think it was John Enright who invited you to come up to Salt Spring Island.
That's right.
And yeah, can you talk a little bit about who John Enright was and what that was like?
Well, he was my partner. John and I were partners. And he got a call from a friend of his suggesting that he come to Salt Spring Island. And I didn't know what he was up to. But he said I think there's something that happened in Salt Spring Island, and I think we should find out what's going on. So my wife and I got on a ferry, and we went to Salt Spring Island. And when we arrived in Salt Spring, we were shocked at how mentally healthy the people were. That was shocking to us because it's hard enough to find a bunch of mentally healthy people, but it's even more hard to find a lot of people who were mentally healthy.
Yeah,
So that's
all in one place.
in one place in Salt Spring Island. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So put it in perspective, Amy. The people that we met were really outgoing and really happy, and we'd never seen that number of happy people in our entire lives. So we were intrigued.
So you're talking about going to Salt Spring Island, meeting Sydney Banks as well, but more even than Sydney Banks, I think you were intrigued by Sydney Banks. You were seeing the people around Sydney Banks
Right.
in states of well-being
Yeah.
and at like high states of well-being.
Right.
And it's interesting because this is the same experience my father had. Like that's what he talks about the most too in his, I mean, he's passed on, but his memoirs of things he's written about going up there were these people were really happy.
Yeah.
And so much so that like he didn't believe it. He used to go, he writes about how I would go to their houses and just knock on their doors at random hours just to see if they were actually arguing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what Roger did. He wanted to catch them off guard.
Yeah. I think we all are skeptical because of the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
We are skeptical about can people be this happy? Are they faking it? And so that was, I guess, touching to you. And I mean, did you not find that in your other parts of your life? Like I think you were in the East Bay working with John Enright at the time, but you didn't
Yeah.
see any people were struggling more, I guess.
Yeah. People were struggling with their mental well-being.
Yeah.
And I was struggling, and Linda was struggling. I mean, we almost split as a couple
Uh-huh.
because
Yeah.
we were struggling so much,
Yeah.
and we just thought it was unrealistic that people could have such high levels of mental well-being.
And when you talk about mental well-being, how would you describe what you saw? Like how would you define it in terms of those people that you saw? What were they doing or how were they being?
Well, to a person, they were very calm, and they had really good senses of humor, and they just were very, very peaceful.
Mm.
I mean, it was very easy to be around them.
And what did they attribute that to?
What they learned from Sydney Banks. To a person, they said, before I met Sydney Banks, I had a lot of problems and a lot of stress. And when I met him, the stress was gone. And there was no other way to express it. That Sydney Banks was the reason they had so much well-being.
And this must have been remarkable to you because Sydney Banks was literally a welder.
He was.
And he wasn't a psychologist. You had been involved, and so had my father, I think, in Eugene, Oregon. I'm 8 years old or something. But, he had been involved he was the director of the Lane County Mental Health Center in Eugene, Oregon. You were involved in probably like a 1970s. It felt like a wave of kind of intense self-help movements
Right.
with John Enright. And some of it was getting your emotions out and really looking critically at yourself and your partner. Um, and so to go up to Salt Spring Island, where here's this man who has a ninth grade education, um, and I've heard this story, honestly, to be honest, so many times.
Yeah, I know.
It's my whole background, life, cultural story.
I apologize for that. You have my sympathies.
You know how Sid used to say, it's getting boring, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but when I'm talking, no, as I'm talking to you now, I'm thinking, wow, it must have been quite a thing, to meet this man. And I think you had some issues with it. I wonder if you could describe, coming from an educated background, were you a psychologist or a counselor in the Bay Area at the time?
Yeah, I was a counselor.
Okay. And you'd been to school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had advanced degrees.
Okay. And then you went and met Sid. And how did that go? Besides seeing all the happy, healthy people around him.
Well, he was very gracious, and he said to us, "Talk to me about your practice. What do you do in your practice?" And I basically said to him, Sid, we go back into the past and to help people with their problems. And he said, "Well, why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, because people have difficult histories." And he said, "Then why don't you help them to see that their history doesn't matter?" That's what he said. Those words came out of his mouth.
Wow.
And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, people had innate health, so that you didn't have to fix them.
Mm.
They were innately healthy." And I just didn't understand how he could make such a strong statement. As a matter of fact, it really pissed me off that he came on so strongly.
Mm.
But he wouldn't have it. He said, "Look, I'm just telling you the truth. Below the surface, people have this innate health." So I, at that point, made the excuse that I had to catch a ferry, and I went back to San Francisco.
Yeah. Enough with this innate mental health BS.
Yeah, yeah.
It's too upsetting. Yeah. I mean,
But at that time, I was very upset at Sydney Banks. I thought that he was ridiculous, and I didn't think he knew anything about the field of mental health. And Linda, to her credit, challenged me. She said, "Look, George, you don't know. I mean, he seems to me that this guy's onto something here." And I said, "Well, I don't think he's on to something." And she said, "Well, I think you should look again, because I think he's on to something. I think he's understands people." So I said to her, "Well, I don't care what you think, Linda, because I'm not buying it." And she said to me, "Well, you don't buy it, you don't buy it." But to tell you the truth, it stirred something in me. And I was very affected by that conversation with Sydney Banks. And I said to her, "Well, the field of psychology knows what it's doing." And she said, "I don't think that's true."
Mm.
And that silenced me. And all of a sudden, I could see, nature, hear the birds singing, and it really had a profound effect on my well-being.
Interesting. So you were upset with Sydney Banks, but
Right.
also you felt like your well-being was increasing.
Yeah.
Interesting. And also, you write in this book, and I have a copy of it right here, which you signed. Thank you so much. The Secret to Mental Health.
Oh, okay.
And you talk about how at one point you were so bothered. And Linda said, well, if you're so bothered,
Well, just ignore what Sydney Banks said.
right, who cares?
That's what he
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. Yeah. But you couldn't.
No, I couldn't.
Yeah.
And I said that to her. I said, I can't. What he says is so ridiculous. I can't ignore it. And she said, well, if you think that it's ridiculous, you should ignore it. But the fact that you can't ignore it tells me there's a grain of truth in there. Her saying that lifted my resistance.
Mm.
All of a sudden, I wasn't resisting Sid.
Now, let's talk about our connection, which is through my father, Dr. Roger Mills, who passed on actually about a year after Sydney Banks passed on in 2009. He passed on the U.S. Memorial Day, actually, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I mean, that was Sid. And in your book, you start off saying, I was hired by Roger Mills to work on a National Institute of Mental Health grant to be looking at what we now call best practices, right? Like what actually is working out there. And he had tapped you to help him find some best practices, which this, again, this is also, it's legendary in my mind because these are the stories I grew up with. But how did you know my father? This is the part I was like, I wonder how they first met, actually.
He was participated in a grant. That's how I knew him.
Oh, so you met through the grant, not before the grant.
Right.
Okay.
John Enright and I were hired by this grant.
Ah, so my father hired you and John Enright? Was that how it
Right.
went? Wow.
Right. We went to Eugene.
And why did he decide to hire you? What was going on with you all?
Well, we were so-called experts in the mental health community. So we were the people that other people would go to for help. And one of the people who went to us was Roger Mills.
What were you doing at the time that was so people thought was so innovative, or do you remember the modalities you were working in?
Well, they weren't very. Let me see how to say it. Let me see. Well, we had our own reputation, and Roger Mills was intrigued by our reputation, and then so he thought, well, gee, maybe these people would be good people to include in our grant. That's how I met Roger, is through that grant.
And okay, so that's interesting. You must have met him in our big house in Eugene, Oregon, which was a communal household.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Amy.
I talk about being raised by wolves.
Yeah.
Or benign neglect, I call it.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I learned that my father did a lot of things because I grew up with my father as a single father. And he did a lot of things that I didn't know about, which weren't apparent to me. Like he made sure there were other single mothers in the household, like our mutual friend Sima and her daughter Leia were, he actually reached out for single parents to move into our house, but we had students and all kinds of folks living there. We had a stripper for a little while. Anyway, let's move on from that. So when you met my father, did you tell him to go to Salt Spring first, or did you meet him first?
Well, the strange thing is, Linda suggested that he should go to Salt Spring.
Okay.
And he took her suggestion to heart. So the first time I met him, he was already in Salt Spring.
Wow. You met him on Salt Spring.
Right.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. So two psychologists meeting for the first time on Salt Spring with Sydney Banks there. Interesting. Yeah, he also was very touched, I know. And I mean, I was there with you all. I was a child.
Right, right. I think you were like 6 years old or something like that.
I think it was 8 or 10 when I'd see Sid.
Yeah, yeah,
When I'd see Sid, he'd like put his hand way down by the ground like I was 3.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But when I saw Sid when I was older, but to be honest, I talk about this time a lot because even as a child, I don't know if your daughters, Kara and Erica, talk about this. Here we were on this idyllic little island. I mean, Salt Spring Island. I mean, it's busier now, but it's always been very idyllic. And I mean, there are deer running around and little bunnies hopping around.
It was very it was very charming.
Yeah, very charming. And so
Yeah,
as a child, it was so much fun because there were lakes to swim in and a lot of nature. And then you could swim in the ocean there or the Salish Sea. And what we noticed, and what I tell people is we as children, we were so uninterested in sitting in a room like Sydney Banks' living room or a community hall or wherever he was, and listening to this old guy, go on and on and on, because at the time we were so busy enjoying life.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And so to me, that's sort of like the proof of we had our innate mental health.
yeah.
We were living it.
That's true.
And we always thought the adults were kind of crazy to begin with.
Yeah, really.
And so what I saw with the adults was that they would go and meet with Sid and have a meeting. It was very informal at that time. People would just be showing up and having a cup of tea with Sid, and a group would form, I guess. I don't know how it was always organized, but I remember how impacted the adults were. Like I could feel that impact, both in what they were saying, but also in their feeling. And the feeling of people in community on that island was very profound. I mean, I remember people would go and help each other with painting their fences or helping them build their rock wall or painting their house. I don't know if you remember. That's what I remember as a child.
Yeah. Well, at that time, Linda, wife Linda, and Roger and I, you would say we were students of Sydney Banks. We were the first students of Sydney Banks, and
Yeah.
and when his program was you go for tea, and then you go to lunch. So it was very informal, but when he talked, he was very profound. And Linda and I were really impressed with his talking was.
Yeah. And I don't want to bypass, I mean, I know you were the two, I believe, first mental health professionals up there, but also there were the friends of Sydney Banks before he had his awakening experience. And we didn't talk about that, but people should know that how did this ninth grade educated welder come to start talking with such certainty
Yeah,
and conviction to mental health professionals and
yeah,
anyone who bothered to come and listen to him? It was because he had an awakening experience on, I believe, was it Cold Mountain, at the Cold Mountain retreat?
yeah.
Yeah,
He did.
yeah. And Cold Mountain Retreat Center, where he had gone for a relationship webinar, or no, not webinar, there were no webinars, a
Yeah,
relationship seminar with his wife, Barb. And he hated it. I mean, they both thought, well, they're doing is arguing with each other. We know how to
yeah,
do
yeah.
that. We're good with the arguing part. It's the other part we need to learn. And Sid talks about how insecure he was
Right.
before this experience, how he canceled going to that seminar many times because he felt like he would be surrounded by professionals and people who were much more educated than he. So, and then within the space of whatever that 3 days was, he had an experience that was so profound that within, I don't know, a few months, he's talking to mental health professionals as if he knows more than they do and
Yeah, yeah.
feeling like he does know more than they do.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And he talks about he went through what he calls dying experience and understanding the nature of God. So anyway, we I think we both would encourage people to go ahead and go find Sydney Banks on the internet and read books. He's written several books now. He has passed on. But so now let's talk about, as a foundation for the rest of the conversation, you and Roger, and I believe Elsie Spittle to some extent, and Chip Chipman were trying to bring these principles. Well, what Sydney Banks was talking about, we haven't even mentioned those principles yet, and you have a whole chapter in your book on them, but out into the world. And so what was it that you heard him say that you thought you could teach others?
Well, that's a good question, Amy. What I thought you teach others, and Roger and I agreed on this. We could teach people that innate health was a default setting for human beings. So they were healthy before they were unhealthy. That's the message that we gave to people. So we had no respect for, people having problems and people working on their problems. We thought that people could just go back to their mental health and it would take care of them.
Okay, so I know that everybody who's listening is thinking, well, that sounds really simple. And also, like, how do I do that?
Well, what happened in the rest of the story, we moved to Salt Spring, and Roger moved to Salt Spring.
And I moved to Salt Spring.
And Amy moved to Salt Spring. And Karen Erica moved to Salt Spring. And because we wanted more of what Sydney Banks understood.
So my memory is that he was talking in lots of very big spiritual terms. I think he was talking about thought and consciousness. I don't know if he had put together the quote 3 principles.
Right.
But that's what would come out over time. And what is it that people need to understand? Can you help people understand what they are and why they're called principles?
Oh, okay. Well, the reason they're called principles is because it's the foundation of mental well-being. So it's at the very core of mental well-being. And the 3 principles, one principle is consciousness, that we are conscious beings. And then another principle is that there are levels of consciousness. So some people have higher level than other people.
What does that mean? Like, for someone who had maybe just first heard this phrase, levels of consciousness, how would you differentiate between a low level and a high level?
Well, it's really simple. At a low level of consciousness, people are easily troubled. But if they're at a higher level of consciousness, they're able to access their own well-being, so they would get over the troubledness.
And let's go to thought. That seems like a key part of being able to get over their troubledness.
Well, the people's problems are because of the use of thought. If people understand the proper use of thought, they're going to have happy lives. Because thought is the key point.
And thought is one of those 3 principles.
Right.
And it's something that, as practitioners, you and I focus on quite a bit, is how are we using our power of thought?
Right.
And there's a difference between understanding the power of thought or the role of thought or how thought works and maybe jumping into all the content of our thoughts.
Right.
And I wonder if you want to say something about that, if you have something to say about why it's important to understand the power and the role of thought versus jumping into all the content.
Well, the simple truth is that we are thinking creatures. So if you ask someone, what do you do with your time? If they were honest, they'd say, I think. That's what I do with my time. I think of this, I think of that. And that's uh, the foundation of the principles.
So, thought and consciousness, from how I understand and teach this, combine to create our experience of life, our psychological experience,
Right,
our spiritual experience,
right.
and our emotional experience, and even to some extent our physical experience, like
That's right. Yeah,
yeah, where if we think too many stressful thoughts, we actually, our body starts to break down.
absolutely.
And one of the foundations of the three principles is you cannot have a feeling without a thought.
Right.
And so there's this connection between thought and feeling, and we worship emotion sometimes. We think emotions have a lot of meaning and we should express them and we should get them out. And I mean, I'm all for, if you feel sad, you can cry. I think it's actually important not to stuff them down. But the primacy of thought is, I think, kind of unique in the three principles psychology. I mean, there's cognitive psychology, there's Buddhism talks about thought quite a bit, but just looking at thought as so foundational and so much a part of our lives in every single second and moment of the day. And seeing that role of thought is so important.
Well, in a way, that's what human beings do. They're thinkers.
Yeah.
So if a person can just understand the fact of the thought, the fact that they think, that would be huge in their lives. If anybody that discovers, oh my God, I'm a thinker, it's going to be a moment of truth for them.
There you go. Thanks for the reference to the show title.
Yeah.
That's why we're called Moment of Truth.
Yeah.
And then there's another principle, the principle of mind. My understanding of mind is as Sydney Banks defined it, is the energy and intelligence of all life.
Yeah, that's right.
Whether
Yeah.
in the form or formless.
In formless. Yeah.
So whether in this world or other worlds or in our bodies or in nature, in our minds, as a spiritual insight, as the capacity to connect with itself, really, right? Like if we're part of mind, we're trying to connect to mind, which I've always found funny because we're a part of mind.
Yeah.
This capital M mind. And I've seen, the Buddhists have a phrase, big mind, the Buddha mind. The Christian scientists have mind as a principle of their religion too. So it's a word that's been used to describe God before, right. The energy of all things, the intelligence of all things. And so, fundamentally, how I see the principles is we really get to take responsibility for our realities, how we're living life, how we're experiencing life, which is, to me, so profound, because if you want to keep blaming the outside world, the spouse, the children for your unhappiness, you're going to have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. You have a big job.
It's a big job to change the world to be the way you think it needs to be.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my next question. And I know that you were saying, well, I don't know everything about politics and so forth, but what's happening, I mean, you said that to me before this show, but it's something that I really want to offer people, is people are very upset with the state of the world.
Right.
They're scared. There's climate crisis, climate fires, and I'm sure you've had them in Washington State where you are. We've had them and it's alarming. And then also now we have this seemingly authoritarian presidency and people being very hurt, people being pursued and, you know, deported and taken to who knows where, and prisons in El Salvador and just all kinds of stuff. And people are, it's such a big shift for this country, which has always felt, I think a lot of people have always felt like it can't happen here.
Yeah.
We're exceptional. We're a special, we have democracy, we have the Constitution. And I mean, Black people might see it differently. Indigenous people might see it differently. Other people of color, gay people might say, well, we actually haven't always been so free or so democratic, but people are in a lot of anxiety. And I think that's where, for me, it's been like, I need to really go deeper with these principles, because it's easy for me to get freaked out too at this time. But what would you say about how people could have peace of mind now?
Well, I think everybody is on the brink of peace of mind. If a person finds their own peace of mind, that's going to serve them well. So really, the problem that people have is they lose their peace of mind. And when they lose their peace of mind, it frightens them.
Do you think people can have peace of mind right now?
I think it's absolutely.
I think you talked in your book about Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps in Germany. And I keep thinking of him and being in a situation that was so terribly bad and still accessing a feeling of love, a feeling of service.
Yeah. And that's a true story, Amy.
Yeah.
That actually happened.
So I know, and also you cite my father's work a bit, working in very distressed communities, and that's what I did for some time with him, and also in Santa Clara County in the jails and juvenile halls, and people were in jail, and we were working with them, and they were able to find their peace of mind, incarcerated. And so the other thing I think people like, peace of mind often seems to people like a state of just kind of zoning out, and everything's beautiful, the birds are chirping, I'm in my peace of mind. But it's also so relevant to our actions. Right? Because when we're acting from peace, well, number one, we're already being helpful, I think, because we are affecting everyone around us, right? Like, I'm in peace. I can give some love because I'm in peace, or even a lot of love. And I can support you, whether you're someone who's right now targeted, or whether you're someone who's trying to be active, or whether you're someone who's afraid, I can be a support for you from within my peace of mind.
See, one of the things that I would say is that everybody feels like they're one of the good guys. So every human being, no matter how difficult their lives are, they feel like when it's all said and done, I'm going to be one of the good guys.
Mm.
And the reason they say that is because they're innocent. They don't understand how the problems that they're having, how they came about.
So you're speaking to psychological innocence, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you speaking about just people in general, or are you talking about like people in power?
I think everybody, every human being has psychological innocence. So that's why everybody looks like one of the good guys.
To them.
Yeah, to them.
Right.
In their mind, they're one of the good guys.
It's hard for me I'm going to be honest with you. It's hard for me to see that in some people right now. I see so much like cruelty and taking things away from people who don't have like Social Security. How can you even contemplate taking away, even reducing people's Social Security when so many people, like, that's how they pay their rent. That's how they pay for food.
That's true.
Now, how do I grapple with that I'm an activist too. I think it's important to step up at this time. That's me, but it's hard for me to know what these people are thinking. What do you think they like?
I don't know
I'm
what
just
they're thinking. It's
uh-huh.
no, it's a mystery to me.
Uh-huh.
But that said, people feel like they're one of the good guys. That's where the how the innocence presents.
Well, and that kind of takes me to Busy Mind, because one of the reasons we connected is because you offered actually to work with my husband and I said, great.
Yeah,
Because I'm always, and plus, you know what, George, because everyone's getting older
yeah,
and I wanted to be connected with you. I wanted to, I mean, I went up to Lacana recently just to visit with everybody. Dickon, these are all colleagues of ours, and Keith, and everyone from my childhood that I've known for my whole life. And so it's just been really nice to have that renewed connection with you. And you shared with us this audio series that you've produced called Busy Mind. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because you said in I think the first part of the Busy Mind series, you said if people could understand that they're living in busy minds and if they could get out of it, I'm paraphrasing, the world would not be in the shape that it's in.
oh, absolutely.
And I wonder if you want to speak to that a little bit.
One of the things that you can see with your own eyes is that people are conflicted, so they don't know what to make of life, and that's the fundamental problem for people is they get afflicted. Now, I would say that you always want to take the high road. So if you can take the high road rather than the low road, that's good.
Going back to busy mind, it seems to me that when your mind is really busy, you can't even see a high road.
That's right.
And some of the things you talked about on that recording were like, I'm trying to remember. So the mind is always going. And what should I do? What do I need to do next? What do I need to achieve? What do I need to get for myself? How do I need to progress in the rat race of life? And that is maybe where I can see some of the psychological workings or psychological innocence of some people in our leadership, which is like they're so caught up in how they want to be successful or powerful or whatever it is that it's like they can't see another way to
That's
be.
right.
And the mind is so busy. And I wish I could come up with exactly the things you were saying on that audio because it was very profound to me. It's so busy that there's no room for this mental health and for wisdom and
That's
insight.
right. Yeah.
And I think you talked about RPMs or something.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? That was very
Well,
helpful.
the RPMs refers to how fast you think.
Like a car.
Yeah. And if you can still your mind, see, what you want is a quiet mind, a still mind, because that's how you can increase your enjoyment of life.
And if you have more enjoyment of life, then you don't look outside so much for how can you have more enjoyment of life.
Yeah.
Right? That's the key. That's the part I was like, this is the key.
Yeah.
I mean, there's problems with capitalism and sexism and racism and all these different ways that we've learned to think and the systems we've designed. But really, it comes down to, I think, the way that we're not content.
Yeah.
Right? We can't be content within ourselves. And so we need stuff. We need more. We need the better
Yeah.
job, the better partner, the better yeah, I mean it's I call it like the treadmill or the like this incredible momentum where we are always thinking about the future. What are we going to get? Or we go to the past and we beat ourselves up, or we go to the future where it's going to be better. But now is not okay.
Yeah.
right?
If you find your own peace of mind, it takes a lot of problems off the table.
Yeah. It's been a discovery for me recently to understand that I can have peace of mind in the current climate
Right.
and to value that, and to not feel urgent and rushed. And um, there's this wonderful saying, it's attributed to different people, but uh, it's from someone who's like an activist person, I think. But I've heard two different people that it's been attributed to. And the phrase is, the times are urgent. We must slow down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's profound.
Yeah. Because it's from this slowing down, this stillness that you speak of, where right action comes from. What to do next? What would be useful? What would be helpful? What would be supportive? I want to talk about your book a little bit, The Secret to Mental Health. And this lays out the principles, and it's actually a lot of stories about clients you've worked with, including people with schizophrenia and many other like case studies in people that you've worked with. What are you offering people with this book?
Well, one thing is I talk about my history and how I discovered I was the first person that Linda and I were the first two people who in Roger Mills uh, who took Sid seriously. And because we took him seriously, we were in a position to learn from him.
Hmm.
And so part of our journey is how we learned from Sydney Banks and what we learned from Sydney Banks. And then other part of there's a lot of vignettes about how people have been helped by the treatment that they received.
You actually talk about working with someone diagnosed with schizophrenia and actually talking to them for a really like maybe an hour. I don't know how long you were with them. Can you tell us about that? Because then all of a sudden they were like, I think I'm cured.
Yeah, that was a profound moment when they said that.
Do you remember what you were saying to them?
Well, they were thinking that there was something vastly wrong with them because their minds were so out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And I was suggesting to them that all they need to do was to calm down, and that would take care of it. And it turned out that I was right and they were wrong. And when they discovered their peace of mind, they said, is that all there is to it? Is that our minds are not doing so good? And I said, yeah, that's it. And they said, gee, that's a simple solution.
I mean, I think one of the most powerful things that Sydney Banks was sharing and that you all were sharing was the idea that people are not broken, that people are mentally healthy, and that to
Right.
be in a mental health system where you are told that you have this diagnosis and it's not clear that it is not you, right? Like it's a way that you've learned to think. It's a
That's right.
thinking pattern, a thinking habit, a way of being that you've picked up either as a survival strategy, but that it's not you. That just seems like it's been so powerful. I mean, I've experienced the power of that, obviously
Yeah,
in my work as well. Like that's so huge that you are not broken, you are not your diagnosis, and you are not who you think you are, really.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, you talk about this particular story where you call the person's counselor. It says the person Bill's practitioner, and they answer the phone, Dr. Pranksy, what can I do for you? And you say, I think that Bill had an awakening during that interview I did with him in your office. He called me and he said that he thinks he's mentally healthy enough to go home.
Hmm.
And the practitioner says, well, Bill is schizophrenic, and this is likely just one of his delusions. And then you go on to keep talking about him. And he talks about a flight into health, I guess, which maybe they sometimes think that people go into health and then come back or something. But then the practitioner is arguing that schizophrenics just can't get cured like that.
Yeah, that his words.
Yeah. But then you also said, I don't know when you wrote this, but I last heard from this patient a few Christmases ago, 20 some odd years since that fateful half-hour interview. He had a family and was enjoying his life. He was now a vice president in a retail store. Yeah. I mean, you have other stories about pain. And I mean, this is just an example that you offer that even pain. You're talking about an Amy. Amy breaks her leg during a multiple vehicle auto accident. Shortly after impact, she hears the cries of a child in a nearby car. All her thoughts are focused on freeing herself from her vehicle and rescuing the child. She runs to the other car and carries the child to safety. During this experience, she has absolutely no pain from her fracture because her thoughts were focused on the child. Once the child is safe and her thoughts turn elsewhere, she feels the excruciating pain of her injury.
That's a true story. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing how powerful thought is.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a lot in this book. Is there anything else you want to mention?
No, that's it.
Okay. I mean, I do feel like I'd like to mention, I mean, I think you and my father were the first mental health professionals who went to Salt Spring and took Citibank seriously, even though you may have argued, right, at first.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, Elsie Spittle was also involved, although she was not a mental health professional. Chip Chipman and his wife, Jan, were also part of being friends with Sid before his experience.
Right.
And then going through it with him and then being stunned and shocked by, the change in him and being actually offended, highly offended a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
Right? That he could suddenly be so arrogant and be telling them all about life, God, the universe, thoughts, mental health, etc. I guess my last question to you, George, is, I mean, you've had a stroke. You must be thinking to some extent, like, I have a limited time here on earth. I've written this book. You've written the other books on relationship and Unbreak Your Heart.
Right.
And what is your central goal now, would you say? Like, what would you most like for this psychology how would you like it to move? Do you have a vision? If you could just express the desire in your heart, what would it be?
Well, I'm currently in private practice, and I intend to be in private practice until I die, really. And I'm just hoping the world comes around. Because there's all this unnecessary suffering in the world. And if I could help with that, that would do my heart good.
I think you've helped with that quite a bit.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I think it's, you've contributed so much. And I have to say the same about my father and so many of our colleagues.
And you as well, Amy.
Thank you.
You've really stepped up and you've really been a massive contributor.
Thank you. Well, thank you, George Pranksy, author of The Secret to Mental Health. You can find more about the book and about George at PrankskyandAssociates.com. You can find out more about the principles too at 3pgc.org, which is, I think George serves on the executive committee for the board of 3pgc. I'm a member, and a bunch of my friends are members, and that's the global community for the three principles. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today, George.
Oh, it was a treat for me, Amy.
Moment of Truth gives thanks to our team, Nyanko Nyasu, sound and tech engineer, and our research and production team, Nyanko, Mei-Ling Obinata, Joy Schendeldecker, and Todd Zimmerman. Todd of Nativerse Studios created the theme song. Kathy Krizik created our logo. Find our podcast of this show and many others, all the others, at all your favorite podcast sites under Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. And please, as I said, like, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast. This really helps spread the good word. Detailed episode notes and links to our sources and further resources are located at our program pages at www.ksqd.org. Thanks to Howard Feldstein and the entire KSQD team on the California Central Coast where this show originates. Thank you for tuning into Moment of Truth. Please contact us at Amy, A-M-I, at ksqd.org with questions or comments. And remember, if we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy. So let's get out there, folks.